Hello, I'm M K Srinivas. I'm discussing in the last chapters about Contract Act 1872, Agency Sections 182 to 238 in particular, wherein we had discussed several topics connected to agency. In my last video, I had discussed about the duties of the agents. Now I have to take up the rights of the agents. While discussing the duties of the agents from 211 to 218, wherein 217 was taken into rights. And section first, duty to execute mandate, that is section 211, duty to follow instructions or customs, that is section 211 and 214. Then duty of reasonable care and skill, section 212, duty to maintain accounts, that is section 213 and 214, and duty to avoid conflict of interest, that is section 215 and 216, and duty to remit sums, that is section 218, were also discussed. In the course of the video, I had brought some important hashtagged cases that we have to remember. That first one is Panna Lal Janki Das versus Mohan Lal, All India Reporter, 1951, Supreme Court, page number 979, wherein some brief facts was brought that the principal was here the agent has become liable for the then we had discussed about duty to execute mandate, that is the first and foremost duty of every agent is to carry out the mandate of his principal. Then duty to follow instruction or customs, that is section 211 to 214, where some three important case laws were also discussed. That was Lilly versus Doubleday, 1881, 7 OBD 510, and Kepler versus Wheeler, 1927, D. Boucher versus Alt, 1878. These three important cases were discussed, wherein I had also said agent was instructed to, in case of Lilly and Dubey, the agent was instructed to follow the instructions of the principal. Now, rights of agent, this is section 219 to 225. As I told in my earlier video, that 217, that is duty to follow right of the retainer, 217 was taken here as a right of agents. Now sections 219 to 225 discuss about the right to remuneration, right to retainer, right to lien, right to indemnity, and right to compensation. These are the rights of the agent. And coming to the first part, that is right to remuneration, is brought under sections 219 and 220. What 219 lays down that every agent is clearly entitled to his agreed remuneration. If there is no agreement, he is entitled to a reasonable remuneration. Then section 220 lays down that the agent is not entitled to remuneration who is guilty of misconduct in the business of the agency to any remuneration in respect of the part of the business which he misconducted. So here, right to remuneration, that is section 219 and 220, that every agent is clearly entitled to his agreed remuneration, that is section 219. Agent is not entitled to remuneration who is guilty of misconduct in business. Section 220. Illustration: A employs B to recover 1 lakh rupees from C and to lay it out on the good security. B recovers the 1 lakh rupees and lays out 90,000 rupees on good security, but lays out 10,000 rupees on security which he ought to have been known to the bad, whereby A loses 2,000 rupees and B is entitled to remuneration for recovering the 1 lakh rupees from the B is entitled to remuneration for recovering 1 lakh rupees and for the investing the 90,000 rupees. He is not entitled to any remuneration for investing 10,000 rupees and he must make good the 2,000 rupees to B. Now illustration 2, A employs B to recover 1000 rupees to see through B's misconduct, the money is recovered. B is entitled to no remuneration for his services and must make good the loss. Now, section 217, right of the retainer. It provides that the agent has right to retain his principal's money until his claims, if any, in respect of his remuneration or advances made or expenses incurred in conducting the business of the agency are paid. Now let us come to the section 221. It says about the right of lien. It lays down that the agent has the right to retain goods, papers and other property, whether movable or immovable, or principal received by him until the amount due to him to commission, disbursements and services in respect of same has been paid accounted for to him. The conditions of the lien are: the agent should lawfully entitled to receive the money from the principal, the property must belong to the principal, the agent has only a particular lien. Now let us come to the next sections, that is the right to indemnity, section 222, 223 and 224, wherein these sections explain that the right to indemnity extend to all losses and the expenses incurred by the agent in the conduct of business. Section 222 says about the agent to be indemnified against the consequences of lawful acts. The employer of the agent is bound to indemnify him against the consequences of all lawful acts done by such agent in exercise of the authority conferred upon him. And then section 223 explains agent to be indemnified against the consequences of the acts done in good faith, where one person employs the another to do an act and the agent does the act in good faith. The employer is liable to indemnify the agent against the consequences of the act, though it causes an injury to the rights of the third persons. Then next section, that is 224, lays down that where one person employs another to do an act which is criminal, the employer is not liable to the agent either upon an express or implied promise to indemnify him against the consequences of that act. This is I had brought these right to indemnity, section 222, 223 and 224 in a nutshell for in a brief sections, that is bare acts I have told you up till now. And there are some illustrations we have to discuss upon. There are 4 illustrations to bring in the correct picture of this right to indemnity. And there is one important case law that we had studied in contract of indemnity, that is Adamson versus Javris 1827, 4 being 66 is also discussed in the course of this illustrations. Then let us come to the first illustration. That is about 222, agent to be indemnified against the consequences of lawful acts. The employer of the agent is bound to indemnify him against the consequences of all lawful acts done by such agent in exercise of authority conferred upon him. So here the very first case law is B at Singapore under instructions of of Calcutta, now Kolkata, contracts with C to deliver certain goods to him. A does not send the goods to B and C sues B for breach of contract. B informs A of illustration 222 I have told at I am on the halfway through. B informs A the suit and authorizes him to defend the suit. B defends the suit and he is compelled to pay damages and costs and incurs expenses. Okay, A is liable to B for such damages, costs and expenses. So this is a very, very important illustration that we have to remember. Here the breach of contract is also there by C sues B for breach of contract, and B informs A of the suit and A authorizes him to defend the suit. B defends the suit and is compelled to pay the damages and costs and incurs expenses. In this taking up the instructions of the principal, A is liable to B for such damages and costs and expenses. So here in this case, right to indemnity, section 222, that a right of the agent is clearly explained. Then there is one more illustration that for section 222, that is be a broker at Kolkata by orders of A merchant there contracts with C for the purpose of 10 casks of oil for A. Afterwards A refuses to receive the oil and C sues B. B informs A, who repudiates the contract altogether. B defends but unsuccessfully and has to pay the damages and costs and incurs expenses. A is liable to B for such damages and costs and expenses. So this is also a case where 222 section under right to indemnity is clearly brought in, and now Calcutta is now Kolkata. We have to read it. There is we have to make some changes. Then let us come to 223, where agent to be indemnified against the consequences of acts done in good faith. In this section there is one illustration. A decree holder and entitled to execution of B's goods requests the officer of the court to seize certain goods representing them to be the goods of B. Then the officer seizes the goods and is sued for C by C. Is sued by C, the true owner of the goods. A is liable to indemnify the officer for the sum which is compelled to pay to C in consequence of obeying A's directions. See, the directions of the principal is followed, and a decree holder and entitled to the execution of B's goods so requires what? The officer of the court to seize certain goods representing them to be the goods of B. The officer seizes the goods and is sued C and the true owner of the goods. Now 223, there is one more illustration, that is B at the request of A sells goods in the possession of A but which A had no right to dispose of. B does not know this and hands over the proceeds of the sale to A. Afterwards C, the true owner of the goods, sues B and recovers the value of the goods and costs. A is liable to indemnify B for what has been compelled to pay C and for B's own expenses. So here the clear illustrations of 223, that agent to be indemnified against the consequence of the acts done in good faith is clearly illustrated, and two examples are brought in, and these two examples are coming under the section 223. Then we have section 224. In this 224 section we have to remember the indemnity what we have followed during this one. Adamson versus Javris 1827, 4 being 66, section 224. Brief facts. What is the plaintiff was an auctioneer. The defendant handed over the cattle and instructed him to sell them in auction. The plaintiff did the same in good faith. In fact, the defendant was not the owner of the cattle. The owner of the cattle sued the plaintiff auctioneer and succeeded in getting damages. The plaintiff sued the defendant for indemnity for the loss he had suffered. Judgment has come. The court held that the plaintiff, having acted on the request of the defendant, was entitled to assume that if what he did turned out to be wrongful, he would be indemnified by the defendant. The court ordered the defendant to pay the damages to the plaintiff. So it is a very beautiful example that we have also brought in contract of indemnity. Adam versus Javris 1827, 4 being 66, section comes to 224. There are other two illustrations, that is A employs B to beat C and agrees to indemnify him against all consequences of the act. B thereupon beats C and has to pay the damages to C for so doing. A is not liable to indemnify B for these damages. That also we have to remember in 224. Then there is one more illustration. B, the proprietor of the newspaper, publishes at A's request a libel upon C in the paper, and A agrees to indemnify the B against the consequences of the publication and all costs and damages of any action in respect thereof. B sued by C and has to pay damages and also incurs expenses. A is not eligible to, liable to B upon the indemnity. So here the defamation, where libel is a concept that has also, A is not liable for such acts of the agent, and the right of indemnity is applicable only in civil acts but not in criminal acts. 224 lays down that where one person employs the another to do some act. Now we have come to right to compensation, wherein section 225 it says that lays down that the principal must make compensation to his agent in respect of injury caused to such agent by the principal's neglect or want of skill. So this is the bare act, and there is one illustration that A employs B as a bricklayer in the building of a house and puts up the scaffolding himself. The scaffolding is unskillfully put up and B is in the consequence hurt. A must make compensation to B. So here right to compensation is the is explained thoroughly in this illustration. And as you know that section 225 lays down that the principal must make compensation to his agent in respect of injury caused to such agent by the principal's neglect or want of skill. So with this we have come to the end of rights of the agent, but there is one information that rights and duties of the principal, that we can say like this: agent's rights and duties are explained above. Either two, if the questions are asked about the principal's rights and duties, the above points may be written in reverse. That is, agent's rights will become principal's duties and agent's duties will become principal's rights. So with this